Good evening. I'm Brian Hurley. We meet tonight to further discuss the comprehensive permit application related to 648, 652 Canton Avenue in Milton. We are not on TV this evening, but we are recording this entire public meeting so that there will be a record of what it was that we discussed this evening, and it'll be available for public information. So this is the third of our meetings to consider how we're going to proceed in connection with the decision relating to this application. We've talked about a number of things, including conditions, and we've talked specifically last week about the requested waivers and how we felt about the requested waivers. And so tonight, I'm really open to my fellow board members as to how they wish to proceed. I mean, we could go and have a discussion about potential conditions, or we could start by having a discussion about whether or not we agree that we would approve the project and that there are conditions that we can impose that would be sufficient to address the many issues that have been raised throughout the course of the public hearings. I mean, I've kind of gone back and forth in my own mind as to what's the best way to approach that. And I'd be happy to hear from you, Mike and Ted, as to what you think is the best way to do it.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and suggest that Judy would think that we should roll up our sleeves and get to the core issue of this. And I think it makes sense, practically speaking. I mean, if there are issues that any one of us is thinking that may prevent this permit from being approved at all, I think it makes sense to tackle that right off the bat.
Judy, is that your thought?
Yeah, yes, I mean, I think you need to get to the heart of the matter, if you will, and then, when you settled that, then I think figuring out what waivers to grant, which ones not, or which ones to grant conditionally. I mean, I think that all is just going to fall into place, but
Okay.
you have a record here with a lot of input in it from a lot of different people, and I think you have to weigh that and decide, where you're placing the credibility of the analysis, and you have to draw findings out of this content. So I think you should have at it.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. Ted?
I would agree with that. I think it would be helpful at first if you could go over with us, since you've, I think you said tried, what is it, 8 or something? I don't know how many you said you tried cases. Go over again the legal principles and standards that we're bound by. And anything else that you think we need to know in deciding the case. I think it'd be helpful for all of us.
I mean, I think the main thing you need to know, Ted, is that the burden on the board is a difficult one. Whatever issues that we have clearly have to outweigh the demonstrated housing need. And the housing appeal, if we were to deny this, the appeal would be directly to the Housing Appeals Committee. And, consistently, they have held towns to a pretty high standard. And it's extremely difficult to prevail at the Housing Appeals Committee on a straight turn down. It's very difficult to meet the burden, at least there, that any issue outweighs the demonstrated housing need. I mean, I think that's really the one thing you need to sort of keep in mind as you go forward here. It's extremely difficult to meet that burden. And that's really the only legal principle I think that really sort of has to be in your mind as you go forward in this discussion. So it's going to be a serious issue. And I think it's fair to say that you can't condition it in a way that will be effective in dealing with the issue. So a straight turn down is very difficult to be a winner on. But I don't mean to suggest that we shouldn't necessarily do that, but it is a difficult burden.
Something I found helpful was just researching over the weekend is that section 23 of the act requires that if we were to decide to deny this application, the HAC would review that to determine whether our decision was quote unquote reasonable and consistent with local needs. And I think that's the standard, but I think what the chair has just said is 100% true in terms of, the way that HAC has come down on individual cases. But, my thinking is more along the lines of the statutory language. I mean, obviously, consistent with local needs is open to a lot of interpretation, but.
Well, bear in mind, the statute is pretty clear, however, about what constitutes a valid local concern. It's, public health, public safety, environmental impact, building and site design, open space, which is, these things, of course, are not all well defined at all, but this is the box. And then quote, other, other planning considerations or something. But, public health and public safety are always probably the ones that boards pay the most attention to, because those are really, I think, the ones that can kind of potentially support a decision most efficiently or not. Some of the other local concerns are not that well tested. I mean, I always think boards should get a design review, but for a project that didn't have a significant public health or safety issue, to hang your entire hat on design would probably not be a smart idea.
Right.
It's when those things all come together with public health and safety that you begin to kind of have a picture for those other considerations that the statute recognizes.
Yeah, so I mean, I think for us to have a decision turned down, we would have to identify, as you said, Mike, public safety or public health issue of consequence, and that concern outweighed the demonstrated housing need. So that's really the question: are there public issues of health or safety that outweigh the housing need? And that's where I think we should focus our attention tonight. And to my mind, the one issue that really comes to the fore in this discussion is the whole issue of water and surface and groundwater, and what this project is going to do to surface and groundwater, and what impact that's going to have on the neighborhood and sort of that section of Milton generally. And to me, that's, if you were going to find a hook, if you were looking for a hook to hang your hat on with respect to a turn down, to me, that's the clear issue that's on the table, at least in my mind. I don't think you're gonna, and there's others. I mean, there's other significant issues, and we can get to those. I mean, I think the whole premise of bringing in and taking out the dirt that's proposed for this site, and the impacts that's going to have on the site, on the neighbors, on the neighborhood, on the town, on traffic. I mean, I think those are also important issues that have to be considered. But the concern about groundwater and what this project is going to do to groundwater in all of the water issues that are associated with this area. I mean, to me, that's the sort of the overarching issue that we have to resolve, and we have to think about, if recognizing that it's a major issue. Are there real legitimate ways that we could condition it to our satisfaction and to the benefit of the neighbors in the town? Can we do that? Can we fashion conditions that would deal with that? And I think, to me, that's really the main issue. There's other issues, obviously, but people are concerned about trees and density and lots of other issues. But I'm not sure that those issues would carry much weight at the Housing Appeals Committee. But I think that we might be able to prevail on this whole issue of public safety as it relates to the water issue. So that's sort of my 2 cents. But Mike, I agree with you. You do have the statutory standard, but the reality is that it's a tougher burden when you actually get on the ground and into the courtroom at the Housing Appeals Committee. So, I mean, why don't we, I mean, one way to go at this is just to talk about what do you see as the major issues that would have an impact on your willingness or ability to vote in favor of this comprehensive permit? Ted, I'll turn to you on that first.
Well, the issues that I had, oh, wait a second, am I muted? No.
So you're-
You know, that I had in mind, you've just indicated that this probably would not be a health and safety issue, but once one is the size, density, height, and footprint of the project, and that it really isn't a project that's generally appropriate for the site. It wouldn't be integrated into the existing or surrounding neighborhood. And it basically puts, you know, a development that's, what is it, about 14 to 15 units per acre into the middle of a neighborhood of single family homes, some of which are historic, that are now located on multi-acre parcels. And it would become 11 buildings, 116 units, 224 bedrooms, and 189 parking spaces for vehicles. But I guess what you're, and to me, that's a very, very significant issue. But I think what you're saying is it's not necessarily a safety issue. It's a design issue.
Well, I mean, it could be a safety issue. It's certainly something to consider, Ted. I don't think I wouldn't dismiss it as an issue. What do you think, Mike?
I mean, I agree. I mean, I think that's my overarching concern about the project is the size and the density and the fact that it doesn't even remotely fit into the neighborhood that it's going to be in. My issues, you know, I have other issues, and let me know if you want to stay on this, but I have other issues too that I think are related. Obviously, water is one of them. I mean, because of the size and density of the project, the water issues are significant. And I'm not convinced that there won't be, you know, based on what's in the record, I'm not convinced that this project will not have a deleterious impact on the site, the abutting properties, or the neighborhoods downstream, or the Pine Tree Brook and the waterways that are downstream from this project. Those are all concerns to me. And then related to that also is the amount of fill that's required to put in this water system, and what the effects that has, not only on the neighbors, but on the trees and wildlife in the area, as well as just the constructability of it. I mean, the draft construction plan that's in the record doesn't make much sense to me in terms of what the project is actually proposing to do. It seems to me like it was a boilerplate construction management plan that doesn't actually apply to this project. I mean, it says that, for example, it says that the trucks would use the local highways and avoid using the local roads. That's impossible. I mean, this site is in the middle of town, so you can use all the highways you want, but you're not going to get into the town that way. So clearly, they're going to have to use all the local roadways. It also makes an estimate as to the number of truckloads and the length of time it will take to deliver the fill and perform other construction activities. That calendar is based on a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. schedule. But then in the next sentence, it says it'll work around peak rush hour and school traffic. which takes a 7 to 7 count schedule and reduces it from like a 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. schedule. And what does that mean for the schedule and for the neighborhood? To have all those trucks up and down the street, all through the town, while kids are walking to school, while bikes are going up and down Canton Ave. What is the impact on the roadways? What is the impact from the dust and the noise and all that stuff on the neighbors and schools and all that? I mean, these are all kind of related issues. I think it all stems from, as Ted described, the size and the density of the project.
Those actually, Mike and Brian, I mean, those were the other two main issues that I had as well, the water issues and all the fill. And it's interesting, with the water, I went back and kind of did a summary for myself of everybody that testified on the water issues and what they said. And, as we said, the testimony is totally disparate.
Right.
But one of the things I kind of found interesting as a lawyer, as well as, being on this panel, is in the groundwater mounding report, section 9 on page 23, which is limitations and assumptions, which is one of the broadest disclaimers that I've seen. Is it okay if I read it?
Sure.
Okay. The groundwater flow model presented herein is a mathematical representation of the groundwater system in geologic setting. Due to the natural complexity of these entities, a model can only achieve a simplified representation of the actual system, and therefore must be considered as a generalized screening tool for use in studying this site. Furthermore, the accuracy, calibration, and validation of any model is limited by the study depth, level of resources, availability, and accuracy of field data, and historical records of site activities. All observations and opinions are limited to the extent of information available at the time of study and review. Special risks occur whenever engineering or related disciplines are applied to identify subsurface conditions. Even a comprehensive monitoring and testing program implemented with appropriate equipment and experience by personnel who function in accordance with a professional standard of practice may fail to detect certain conditions. For similar reasons, actual environmental, hydrologic, geological, and geotechnical conditions that were inferred to exist may differ significantly from those that actually exist. That's pretty broad and basically, I mean, I know that having been a lawyer for so long and read a lot of reports of experts in various disciplines, that most reports have disclaimers and limiting assumptions, etc. But, it also tends to undercut the entire opinion to a certain extent, as some of them do. And particularly with respect to subsurface conditions. So I went through, all of the expert reports, and there are a lot of, the opinions are on both sides. Mr. Reardon did, and Mr. Dillon did say that they thought that the effect post-development on water conditions would be imperceptible. They also used a much more simplified method. The experts that were retained by the neighbors all had critiques of methodology, of the data used, of the application of the data used, of tables that were inconsistent, even though they were supposed to be discussing the same things. I mean, I have them all listed in relative detail, but as we've said before, the opinions couldn't be more disparate, and that leaves room for concern about what could happen in the future. And I have the same concerns about all the fill that's being brought in as well, and that effect on not only on the neighborhood but on the water conditions, and as we talked about the truck trips and all the loads and how long that will occur, and traffic conditions, and not only that, but the concrete deliveries, and how the site is going to work with everything going on there, and all of the staging required, and the storage of materials, and snow removal at times. And I mean, there's just a lot of issues, and I don't know whether they all fall into the category of public safety, but they're, it's just, to me, it's remarkable in any, in a development like this and in a town like Milton, as opposed to on a waterfront piece of property, that in order to build on it, you would want to put in that much, or have to put in that much fill. But in any event, what do you think, Brian?
No, I mean, Ted and Mike, you both identified some very serious issues. I also today, Ted, went back and probably not as carefully as you, but I went back and read through all of the various expert reports. And, like you, I kind of came away from it saying, I'm really not sure what I believe here, which is most credible. On Scott Horsley wanted some additional modeling done. There was much ado about whether or not the applicant had revealed certain information that they wanted to have, and they seem to be withholding some data. Sean Reardon, who I thought was very helpful during the course of the proceedings, his firm ultimately said that they didn't see a problem, but on the other hand, he's not really, he was quick to point out during the hearings that he's really not a water expert. That's not really his expertise. And so we've got sort of the battle of Scott Horsley versus the applicant's water people. And you're right, I noted that same disclaimer. It's, it's fairly standard, but it's also fairly sort of disquieting. Because one of the things that I think about when I think about this project, kind of laying in bed at night, is, do I want to be the guy that voted for a project 3 years from now where we've unleashed hell on that neighborhood, where there's water all over the place? And I just, that's a concern to me. And that's how I sort of feel about this whole proposal, is that, we run in a great, it may be a small risk, but I think it's a small risk of a great disaster. And that makes me very nervous about voting to approve. I didn't mean to intimate at the beginning of this discussion that I was in favor of this. I just was trying to stay somewhat neutral on the subject. But yeah, I have those same concerns. And I'm not sure, I think logically, having identified these issues and the serious issues, I think the next step typically would be to say, well, okay, before we vote to disapprove this, is there a way that we can condition it to address those issues? And I'm high pressed to come up with the conditions that we could fashion that would deal with this. I thought, is a way to do it to have some huge bond amount that you would have for the benefit of the neighborhood. But I don't know what that number is. And I don't know the practicalities of the bond amounts. I worry tremendously about all those trucks going in and out of there. I don't know how that's going to work as a practical matter. And although I recognize that has a temporal aspect to it, it's not going to go on forever. During the period of time that it does go on, and it seems like that'll be probably at least 2 years, I feel like it's going to be an incredible problem that we're creating on Canton Avenue and in the surrounding neighborhood. So I'm not unmindful of these issues, but I guess that's one of the questions I want to ask you guys is, do you think there would be a way that we could address some of these issues by conditions? Or do you think they're so intractable that that's not a practical solution?
I don't think the applicant has given us an out there in terms of the sizing down the project, right? There's been no discussion. There's nothing in the record about any steps you could take to make the project smaller. I mean,
Yeah, I saw a reference in a recent piece of correspondence that said that there might have been something earlier pointed out that it would have been a possibly good area for like a 40-unit development. But I went back and looked at prior reports and things and didn't see anything. And I haven't had a chance to look at all my notes from all of the hearings to see, maybe it was in testimony, but yeah, I don't recall any submission that, do you, Brian?
No, I don't think,
For a lesser number of units? No.
Ted, I'm pretty sure there wasn't one.
Yeah,
And I mean, I don't think we have the information available to us or the tools available to us
right.
that would allow us to make some kind of a reduction in number. I mean, I don't know that there's any meaningful way that we could do that, because I don't think we have the information. I don't think it was presented to us. It was kind of presented as an all or nothing proposition. And, you know, I wouldn't have a clue as to how to go from 115 units. Where do you go to 60?
Yeah.
Do you knock off 4 buildings? Do you knock off 3 buildings? I mean, I just don't think we have a basis to do that.
one way to do it that I thought of, and this is probably not doable, but you guys are more experienced than I am. And when you hear what this is, this is effectively a denial of the application. But if our concerns are with the water and the fill, you know, if they're primary concerns, to just limit the amount of fill that could be brought in to what's allowed in the town, and then condition the project on coming up with a water management plan that is acceptable under the wetlands standards, while using that fill, subject to some kind of approval process. That would probably have a direct effect of reducing the size of the project. But it may also not be workable at all for the applicant. So it may, does that make sense, or am I totally off the wall here?
You mean something that becomes like a de facto denial?
Well, that's what I don't want to do, right? So
Yeah.
I don't want to issue a de facto denial, but it seems to me limiting the amount of fill would kind of address a lot of the concerns we're talking about, right? It would eliminate the environmental impacts. It would eliminate some of the safety impacts. It would, in terms of the amount of trucks and the amount of fill, and it would reduce the size of the project, and presumably reduce proportionally the effect of any water issues.
I hear what you're saying.
It's very hypothetical.
I don't know how, even if we went down that road, how would we come to a number? What's the right amount of fill? We don't have any
No.
sort of data that would allow us to do that, I don't think. And it would significantly reduce, I mean, however we divine that number, it would significantly reduce the number of units. So I think in some ways it would be a de facto denial. I hear you, Mike, and this whole fill issue is probably the single biggest issue that we face, but I'm not sure that reducing it, trying to come up with a way to reduce it is a practical approach. I think it's a nice approach, but I just don't know how we can do it. I don't think we have the tools to do it. I don't think we were given the tools to do it.
That's what I figured, but I thought it was at least worth throwing it out there for consideration.
I mean, one thing, and I don't think that, I'm not necessarily suggesting this is the answer. I mean, that would probably be the case anyway, even if it were allowed, would be to have a consultant on behalf of the town follow the project at every stage and do periodic testing, and make, the hydrologist's approval of the project based upon that testing, a condition to the occupancy permits or whatever. I don't know exactly how it could work. I know that Mr. Corcoran submitted some suggested conditions, which I read when they came in, but a number of them related to the water-related issues. But Brian, can I ask you a question, because I haven't come across this before in 40Bs. But suppose it were denied and it were reversed on appeal. Would the application be denied without any conditions at all? I mean, allowed then by the Housing Appeals Committee without any conditions at all?
Judy, you can probably answer that better than I can.
Well, it's basically a new hearing. It's a new trial, so new case. There's no guarantee, let me leave it at this. There's no guarantee that the conditions you impose will survive. Because clearly the applicant's interest would be to, not be subject to those. And so the risk you run is that those conditions go out the window. And I'm not saying this to tell you that you should approve the case. I'm just telling you, the reality is when you get into the Housing Appeals Committee, that the conditions you put on the permit may go away.
Right, but the question is, if we voted this down, said we're not going to approve this with that conditions, right? And so now it goes to the Housing Appeals Committee, it gets overturned, it gets appealed to the land court, to the land court in that case, and we lose. Judge Foster in the land court rules against us and says, no, that was improperly denied. So then it gets remanded, right? At that point?
Oh, if the Housing Appeals Committee does not agree with your decision, they will instruct you to file a decision, to accept a decision and file it with the town clerk that is essentially their superseding decision.
Without any conditions? Or
Any conditions they choose to impose.
so they could choose not to impose any condition?
Yep.
That's what I was asking.
For an outright denial, it's most likely that they will simply grant the permit that the applicant requested. That's usually what I mean, don't see that many denials, but that's typically what happens in a denial case.
And there's no opportunity to have a discussion about conditions in that case?
I don't think it doesn't get remanded to us.
That's
So
correct.
It's sort of out of our hands at that point.
That's correct.
So-
The Housing Appeals Committee has the authority under the law to grant a superseding permit, and that's what they do. So, and now if there are specific matters that they think the board should take up, they can, I suppose, I've never seen this, but I don't know any reason why they couldn't remand some matters to the board. But typically with a denial, it's a petition from the applicant is to overturn the denial. So what they're asking for is an approval of the permit they requested. And that's what the Housing Appeals Committee is going to consider.
The only caveat I would add to that is, so let's assume you disapprove, it goes to the Housing Appeals Committee, they overturn it, they impose no conditions, then presumably the town would appeal that Housing Appeals Committee decision to the land court. And the land court would then decide whether the Housing Appeals Committee decision was appropriate. And you probably could ask the land court, though, if they were going to, as part of a decision overturning our decision, you could ask them to impose conditions, and the land court might very well be willing to do that.
And you can ask the Housing Appeals Committee. I'm just saying there's no guarantee that that any of those conditions you want will survive, because what's going to be heard is the denial.
Right, but I think you might find a more receptive forum in the land court if you ask them to sort of condition any denial on the imposition of certain conditions to that denial. I mean, I think I haven't had Ted experience with this situation, because like Judy says, it's very rare that you get these denials, but usually it's not a denial, but a reduction or imposition of conditions that you appeal, and you fight about that. But you very rarely have seen straight out denials. Doesn't happen off the trail. Although it just happened in Braintree last week, didn't it? Didn't Braintree vote down a 40B?
Well, they're in the middle of a 1.5% general land area dispute.
Right, but I think they turned down a 40B, and I don't think they relied on that. But anyway, it happens, but it's fairly rare. So I don't know where all that takes us.
Braintree is asserting that they meet the general land area requirement.
Right, but I think this is, from my experience, and I haven't done the most 40Bs of everyone around, but I mean, I've done a bunch, and I think this is one of the most difficult projects that I've seen. I mean, I've not seen projects that have this kind of fill that's being brought into a site and the impact that has, or a project this large that's sitting on clearly high groundwater, to the point where they have to bring in these thousands of tons of dirt to deal with that problem. I don't remember ever seeing one quite like this. I think this is sui generis, frankly. And so I think we have some legitimate, very legitimate concerns that we have to deal with. And I'm not sure that we've got the tools available to us, frankly, to approve it and fashion conditions in a manner that will obviate all of those legitimate concerns that we have.
Well, I think that is, a challenge that you have, is that there's no plan that's going to reflect the conditions that you want to impose. So just that, I'm imagining how this permit would have to be written in a way that the building inspector could then, at some point down the road, have a plan submitted for a building permit and review it against a decision where there really wasn't a plan of record to begin with that reflected everything that you were saying. So just the administration of a permit like that gets very difficult.
Right.
But again, I mean, you guys have to decide what you think is right for your town. I've always said this, despite all the issues with being overturned and the difficulty with the Housing Appeals Committee and all that stuff that we all know, in the end, you have to decide what you think is right for your town. And if you deny and you lose, at least you've done what you think was right for the town. If you write a decision that imposes a lot of conditions which the applicant doesn't like, and they appeal and you lose, at least you've done what you think is right for your town. I don't know how else to say it. That's really what you end up with is, where do you place the weight of the credibility of all this information that you have? You have testimony from 3 hydrogeologists here, or 3 people with hydrogeologic credentials, and they don't agree. They don't agree. They're not telling you the same thing. You have Tetra Tech's hydrogeologists, you have Scott Horsley, you have the applicants.
Right. And as I said, I mean, not to repeat the obvious, but that sort of, that dilemma of the 3 different, opinions, makes it extremely difficult for us, because that issue is a game changer. I mean, if people are wrong on that issue, then we're going to be creating enormous problems for immediate abutters, the neighbors, and and that whole section of town. Not to mention the sort of the temporary impacts of all that truck traffic on Canton Avenue, which is going to be unbelievable. That's a big risk that we take, and I'm not sure that I'm the guy that wants to take that risk, frankly. So to me, I came to this sort of leaning in favor of voting against this. I'll be honest. I just feel very uncomfortable approving something that I see has a potential to have such adverse impacts on so many people. And I don't know how we condition that. I mean, I suppose you could just, I'm just hypothesizing here, but I suppose you could say, okay, you can do this, but we want you to do, when you're done putting all this dirt in there, we want you to allow us to engage an independent third-party, water expert who will do a mounding analysis, and then we'd have to set some sort of parameters of what it means. And if it does this, that, or the other thing, then things have to change. But I think that gets very, very complicated for us to try and do that. to try and set a standard that we would apply with that sort of post deposit of fill kind of analysis. I don't know how practical a solution that is to set that kind of a condition. And the applicant wouldn't go for that condition anyway. They would absolutely appeal that.
Judy, did the 582 Blue Hill Avenue decision, did that have some kind of a condition about the town having a consultant with respect to water?
There are conditions in that permit around the town, the ability of town departments to
Yeah.
retain specialists to review the project at various intervals along the way, to
Mhm.
establish that certain concerns the board had were being adequately addressed, consistent with the
Mhm.
conditions. So that's, I think, even in the ice house, we had a
Yeah.
condition there about being able to employ outside consultants for inspectional support all the way through. So that's not uncommon.
Okay, and who pays for that?
The applicant.
The applicant?
So it's your consultant, it's that's your
Right.
consultant hired by the town.
Yeah.
Or by the consultant, the applicant, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just asking. I mean, I hear what you say about the land court and everything. My concern would just be if it were denied and then reversed somehow, that, adequate conditions wouldn't be, couldn't then be put on the permit. But, so. And have
I
no
think
experience
that's
with-
just
Yeah.
a risk that's
Yeah.
inherent in the denial.
Yeah.
Do you see that, just to digress for a second, do you see, I mean, we've talked about water and we've talked about the sort of the construction period impacts associated with the inflow of dirt and trucks and all the rest. Do you think there are any other sort of intractable issues that you see other than those or concerns that you have other than those issues that would form the basis for a denial or form the basis for some serious conditions?
And I think the trees are an issue. I know that most people don't think of trees as the primary issue, but if the proposed construction management plan requires all staging, all parking, all dumpsters, all deliveries, all trash removal, all of these things to happen on the site, which it does. I find it hard to, and on top of that, they've got to build this project and put in the fill and all that. I find it hard to believe how all that is going to be on the site without killing the trees and without affecting the trees that are on abutting properties.
Yeah, I agree. Trees are an important issue. And yeah, I find it hard to understand how it's all going to stay on the site. I just worry that you're going to see trucks and vehicles parked on Canton Avenue, as this thing goes along, because
Well, they're on Holmes Lane or Birchwood or whatever, despite any conditions that would be put.
well, despite the fact that they don't have a right to be there.
Right.
Well, I mean, you see it all the time. I mean, it may be that you're not allowed to park a truck on the side on Canton Ave, but the truck is pulling a flatbed that's carrying a backhoe, right? And that's got to get on the site. So it stops on Canton Ave and it stops traffic while the backhoe is unloaded, and it takes 45 minutes. And then that truck's got to go park for the day somewhere else and then come back at the end of the day and do it all over again. I mean, I don't think that's addressed really by just having parking required to be on site.
Right. Well, yeah, Mike, what I was saying, I don't think they're going to have enough room on site to have everybody parked there.
Right.
The workers, the trucks, the equipment, I don't know how all that's going to work. But you're right, Ted, the natural inclination, if you're a guy coming to the job and you can't find a place to park, you're going to park wherever you have to, right? Holmes
Yeah.
Lane, wherever it's going to be. It's a challenge, the
I mean,
location.
yeah. I mean, it really isn't. I mean, it's not close and convenient really to public transportation. Like some of the other projects, or larger buildings are in town, as has been pointed out in some of the materials, or to any shopping. I mean, it's not like people are going to be walking. You can walk to the high school from there, obviously, but and to the hospital, I guess. But there aren't any shops in walking distance. There aren't any other services.
I would be a little careful with that one. Under the 40B regulations, the subsidizing agency really is the one that sort of exerts jurisdiction over whether a site is generally appropriate for affordable housing, and they've already opined that it is.
Well,
So I don't know that you've got much to hang your hat on there.
I mean, what about if it's a safety issue? If you're going to have, right, you're going to have increased pedestrian and bicycle traffic as well as automobile traffic.
Yeah.
And this is in a town, in the center of a town that has a recent demonstrable increase in traffic accidents to both vehicles and pedestrians. That concerns me.
I understand, and that's a little different. What I'm saying is that they make a determination of general suitability, but they don't, or they attempt not to, step into the role of the permitting authority. So the assumption is that you're going to find some information perhaps through the permitting process that might determine that the site is actually not appropriate because of public safety or public health or those other sort of, consistent with local needs issues that you can consider. That's all I'm trying to say. But I think in terms of proximity to grocery stores or walkability or public transit, the subsidizing agency has already determined that that's not an issue. Just trying to narrow the issues here.
Are there any other issues that warrant discussion or consideration that bear on the issue of whether or not to approve the project? I mean, so we've talked about water, surface.
Oh, I
Go ahead, Mike.
I'm sorry if I cut anybody off, but I just don't remember the answer to this, and I couldn't find it in my notes, and I couldn't find it in the record. But on August 10th of last summer, the building department issued a letter stating that, and this is after the revised plans were submitted, suggesting that the project represents a substantial increase in demand on municipal water and sewer infrastructure, and is likely much larger than likely. I'm sorry, and this impact is larger than forecasted in the original design. And I was wondering if, I don't remember ever getting a response to that concern from the building department. I didn't know if anybody else had come across that.
What was the date of that letter?
August 10th.
I don't recall that there was one, Mike.
I mean, if there are sewer issues, I feel like that's a safety and health concern as well. That can be conditioned maybe, but.
Definitely.
Right. What's another consideration, and I don't have the list of waivers right in front of me tonight, but a lot of the waivers have to do with, or several of the waivers have to do with us sort of, for lack of a better term, usurping the role of local entities, boards and the like, maybe we could just not do that. Maybe not grant those waivers and let the Concom review this and let other town boards or entities review this. I mean, that may be an approach, at least with respect to some of the issues, but none of that gets to the core issue of the reality that this project is too big for this site, and as a consequence of its size, it necessarily has to exacerbate existing water conditions in ways that we really can't completely foresee, but that could have significant detrimental impacts on abutting properties in the neighborhood. I mean, that's to me, that's always is the overarching issue that we can't deal with by way of condition. A lot of these things we could deal with I think we could deal with by condition. And Ted, I take your point. One way we could deal with this would, if we had the tools to do it, would be to significantly, revamp, revise, redesign the project in a way that would ameliorate the need to bring in fill and the quantities that are being proposed. But in so many instances, I just don't think we have the wherewithal and the tools to do that. And I don't know that we have the ability by way of conditions to properly address the issues that I think have probably been raised.
Yeah, I think the Conservation Commission, the letter that was sent around to everybody today, that was from, what was it, sometime early last year, the Conservation Commission indicated that a portion of the project site would be subject to Conservation Commission jurisdiction. So not the whole site. I'm not sure exactly what that means in terms of
Right.
In terms of if they only had jurisdiction over part of the site.
Yeah, I mean, they'll have jurisdiction over within a certain distance.
Yeah, right.
Of the stream. And
that's what I, right.
But they won't have jurisdiction over much of the balance of the site.
Well, that's what yeah. So the fact that it has to go before the Conservation Commission isn't a sure protection against the water issues.
It's some help, but it's not a complete answer to the problem, right?
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that I was looking at today, as I tried to go back and see what have other town entities, town boards had to say about this project, and I think it's pretty clear that the planning board is against this project. I mean, that recent letter that we received from the chairwoman, who said in the letter that she was speaking on behalf of the board, was against the project. And although they recommended some possible conditions, they were clearly against it. So that's one board. I went back and looked at the most recent letter from the selectmen, and they really didn't come down sort of one way or the other, but they certainly did point out some significant issues relating to the project. And those are the sort of the two boards that I think probably the only ones that I saw in the record. But the planning board was clearly against this, and that has an impact on how I think about this. I mean, am I wrong to think that way, Mike and Ted?
No, I don't think you're wrong to think that way.
That was my interpretation as well. Planning board and select board know maybe better than we do what the consequences of any action we take are.
Right. But the select board, you're right, suggested some conditions. The letter was not as strong as the planning board's letter, but it did raise a lot of issues that it had with the application and the project.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they're all issues that, for the most part, we've already talked about tonight.
Right.
So, but I give a lot of weight to the fact that the planning board is against this. And it's not something that I would just lightly ignore going forward. So we've been at this for about an hour now. my feeling is that if we were to take a straw poll right now, then we would probably get a turn down.
Do we, in a situation like this, do we need to, as part of our function, to go back and look? I'm not saying we do this, I'm just to go back and look at suggested conditions and see whether there are any that could salvage it, or is that?
That was actually going to be my suggestion, Ted. I mean, my suggestion was going to be that we ought to, come up with a comprehensive, looking at all of the materials that were presented to us and all of the different conditions that have been imposed by the planning board, by Mr. Corcoran, and by others. Look at all those conditions and discuss them, and see, in light of that discussion, whether it sort of changes our view with respect to the approval or disapproval of the plan. But I think we owe it to the process to do that. That's just my sense of things. But you guys, I mean, we could just vote right now and say 3-0, we're out, goodbye. Do a decision. But I think we owe it to the process to go back and say, okay, here's what people have recommended for conditions. Do we think they do the trick?
I think that's wise.
Yeah, because there are conditions suggested kind of throughout the memos from the town staff. The peer review consultants, Sean in particular, had some suggested conditions.
Right.
Yeah, so it's probably a good idea to maybe look at those and say, sort of ask yourselves, if we could impose all of these somehow successfully and make this work, would that overcome the discomfort that you have with approving the project? And, it's going to be a yes or no.
I think it's a necessary step. I think from a due diligence standpoint, I think we have to do that. I know I'm not prepared to do that tonight. I mean, we could do some of it, but I think we have to go back through an awful lot of paperwork and come up with a comprehensive list of suggested conditions and go through them all. We could do some of that tonight, but I'll defer to you guys on that.
Unless any one of the four of us has them at their fingertips.
The problem is they're all in separate letters, It's
Yeah.
like,
I don't have all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that,
I mean, I can pull them up and share my screen. Judy, if you happen to know enough to point me in the right direction here.
I don't want to, if we're doing it, I don't want to miss any.
I'm actually looking for Sean Reardon's most recent memo, which I might end up having to go.
Yeah, I think Judy, you may be thinking of the one that was from Mr. Dillon that was on March 15th, I think.
That's the hydrogeologist.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, I do remember that.
March 22nd, I think.
Yeah, it's Tetra Tech, March 22nd.
I'm sorry, yeah, 22nd is right. Yeah.
Crystal, could you let me share my screen? I don't know if that would be helpful to you
They
guys.
do have some, he does have some conditions listed at the end of that memo.
I'm not sure why it's not giving me the option to do that. Allow to multi-pin.
Yeah, it's funny, Crystal, it's doing what it kind of does to me sometimes when I don't have ability to grant host, co-host privileges.
Yeah, hold on one sec. I'm gonna ask Shane.
What are we trying to do?
I'd want to, sorry, Tim, I want permission to share my screen.
Yeah, so Crystal, there's the share screen button, the green one
Yeah,
at
I
the
see
bottom of your
that.
screen. Do you see that?
Mhm.
So there
Oh,
should be a
I'll just
little,
hit all. Just change it to all. That's
yeah,
it. Okay.
it's like under advanced settings or something.
Yeah, no, I see it.
All of a
Thank
sudden,
you.
we're all.
I think, did that work?
Yep, that works.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Jen.
Okay, so you should be able to see it now, right?
Yep,
Yeah,
there it is.
Where is this from, Mike?
This is the March 20th. I'll scroll up so you can see the March 22nd letter from Peter Dillon at Tetra Tech.
Okay,
And these are the proposed conditions at the bottom of the letter.
okay. Okay.
well, I mean, if they are already expecting that post-development, the effect upon water table elevation is going to be imperceptible, then I'm not sure that these conditions would satisfy a situation where it was not only not imperceptible, but was damaging to neighboring properties, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, Chad, as when I looked at them, I thought, sure, we can put these in. They certainly don't hurt, but I'm not sure that they really get to the core of the issue, though. Because keep in mind, I mean, these guys reached the conclusion that there wouldn't be any serious problems, right?
Right.
So that, that's, you have to look at it from that perspective. So yeah, we could do that. One place you could look to, which was, I mean, it's very helpful and almost exhaustive, is the testimony, which described as the testimony of Denny Swenson, planning board chair, dated March 22nd, 2021. It goes on for a number of pages, but you get to a point and there's a fairly lengthy list of conditions. There's site conditions, there's a whole variety of conditions, many of which I think are right on point. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that document, but it's pretty exhaustive in terms of its coverage of potential areas for conditioning.
There's
Yeah,
also-
so that-
I don't know.
it's
Boards, Is that on the board's website?
I haven't been able to find that. I've been looking for it all day.
I'm sorry, which one is this, Brian? What's the date of it?
It's entitled Testimony of Denny Swenson, Planning Board.
Chair.
Chair, March 22, 2000, well, actually says 2021. And the beginning of it, the salutation says, "Thank you, Chair."
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have, it. I'm not sure whether I got it from the website or how I got it, but I have a copy of it.
Can someone send it to me? Because I don't.
okay. I mean, I assume it's part of the record, right?
I think it is, yeah. I think
Well,
I
I'm
got
not
it.
questioning that. I'm not finding it on the board's website, so I don't know how anybody else would get access to it.
Okay. So how do we get it on the board's website?
Well, I mean,
I would
if
ask Tim.
you-
Yeah, I never received that from Denny or anyone else, so that might have been something that went directly to the board. I'm trying to search through my email. I haven't seen it, so if someone can send that to me, we'll get that up.
I just looked through my email. I don't have it either, so I'm not sure where it came from.
Really should be available to people to read.
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna make reference to it, I think it needs to be on the website. Can we do that?
Well, I mean, I think you can treat it as received by the board prior to the close of the public hearing.
Yeah, I had just assumed that it was.
Well,
part of the
I
record.
had it. I mean,
I mean, before we had websites, all this stuff was on paper sitting in somebody's file cabinet. So,
Right,
it's just that I think it really ought to be up. And I need it. I mean, I can't work on it. If you're going to refer to some of her testimony, I need to have it to be able to incorporate into the decision, however the decision's going to go.
okay. Agreed, I just had assumed that it was already there, but obviously I was wrong on that. So we need to get that on the website.
Yeah, so if someone who has that can send it to me, we'll get it up first thing in the morning.
But if
Ted,
you want,
can you send it?
yeah,
I
I
don't think
can't,
Tim, oh, Ted, I don't think Tim has it either, right?
No, he doesn't. That's the problem.
Okay, yeah.
if you want, Ted, I don't know if you have it.
I must have gotten it from the website. I don't remember somebody sending it to me.
It's
If
not
you
on the
guys
web.
didn't get it, if you guys wouldn't have gotten it sent, I wouldn't have. So let me.
If it's on the
Okay,
website.
maybe it's misnamed or something.
Well, I'm not finding it on the testimony report, so
I can tell you, Ted, that I didn't get it from the website. I just assumed it was on the website, but I definitely got it by way of email from Danny Swenson.
can
Okay,
you just find the email and forward it to Tim?
Judy, I could do that. I can't do it right now, but I could do it.
Sorry, yeah. I meant like right this minute, Brian.
I'd have to go back and find it. Ted, if you must have got it by email too. I don't think you got it off the website.
okay, all right.
All right, one way or the other, we'll get it to Tim. And to Crystal tomorrow.
Okay. That'd be great.
And so maybe it's not such a great idea to talk about it then if it's not.
Right,
By the
if we don't have it. And
We should-
I pulled out the memo dated March 21st from Ned. I think it was the first memo. He sent two of them and the second one had a few extra suggested conditions, but this was the first one he sent. And I would want, there's a number of them relating to groundwater and stormwater. And I would want to read them more carefully before talking about them. But, there's some that call for posting a bond for certain things. And,
Right.
So
Well,
those
maybe-
are, if we were going to
Maybe-
review them, those are ones that should be reviewed too.
Yeah.
Maybe,
definitely.
maybe we should just suspend at this point tonight and just agree that we're all gonna go back and read these specific items that we've just identified, particularly the testimony of Denny Swenson, who actually testified, but this was sort of her pre-prepared
Yeah.
testimony. I think everyone needs to read that, and I think we should work from those things, as well as Ned Corcoran's suggested conditions, and be prepared to have that discussion. And this is all with an eye toward sort of concluding one way or the other, whether we think that the conditions can be fashioned in a way that will address all of our sort of deep concerns about the plan as a whole. And
Or if they create conflicts,
in what
Right.
sense?
conditions that are suggested that might create a conflicting outcome. Conditions may be suggesting doing something to limit the negative impact on the project, but may in fact conflict. All I'm saying is we need to make sure they're consistent.
Okay. You mean internally between
Yeah,
themselves?
Internally consistent. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
And of
So
course,
are you saying we're not looking, I mean, because there are conditions. I mean, other people submitted conditions too. I mean, I think there may be conditions in some of the other groundwater reports. I think I remember in reading them that there were conditions mentioned, possibly in some of the neighbors' experts' reports.
Yeah. I think
as well. But I mean, are we limiting ourselves to just the groundwater and stormwater issues, or?
Well, no, in fact, I have,
Yeah,
in my decisions that I've drafted for the board to date, there are some conditions that are really just standard anyway,
right,
boilerplate conditions that you would have in any comprehensive permit. So,
right,
you know, I'm not worried about those creating an inconsistency. I'm just saying that between, for example, you know, conditions that Tetra Tech's hydrogeologist suggested, that Scott Horsley suggested, that Ned suggested, that Denny suggested, you want to make sure that although they may be going in a certain direction, that they don't unwittingly conflict. That's all I'm saying.
No, I
There's
understand.
something
I understand.
Yeah.
And Ted, I don't mean to, I don't think any of us mean to eliminate any potential
Okay.
conditions that have been
all right. I
discussed.
just want to make sure if we're doing this, that I review everything I'm supposed to review.
Absolutely. But I think our focus has been on,
Yeah.
I mean, on the water issues. And that's because we were kind of heading down a road where it sounded like we might vote against this. And I think we kind of
Yeah.
stopped ourselves and said, let's go back and look at what the experts and others have said about the water issues, to see whether they might form the basis for not denying the permit, but rather conditioning it. But that certainly wasn't meant to exclude other issues that could be addressed by way of condition. I was kind of looking more to the big ticket item.
Right.
But we can deal with all of that. So I think our homework is to go back, and there's a lot of stuff to go back through, but to find as many sources of information and input as we can on the subject of conditions, and just go through those in detail at the next hearing. And I mean, I think given the time constraints that we're operating under, I think it would be my hope that we would have that discussion at the next meeting, and that perhaps we'd even do some kind of a vote at the end of that. I mean, we're going to get down to short timeframes pretty soon. So,
Yeah.
And that brings me to my next favorite subject, which is, can we schedule any other meeting dates? We're kind of a little bit light on meeting dates right now.
So, Mr. Chair, as you know, but as I've not made public to the board, a conflict on Thursday night. We have a scheduled hearing this coming Thursday, and I have a funeral and wake to attend in New York, so I cannot do it.
No, we understand that. I was just trying to look for a replacement for that date. So what's our next hearing date? I'm just not finding my calendar here for some reason.
Well, our
What's
next date's this Thursday.
Right,
and
so
then-
that we're gonna have to put that off because Mike can't attend that.
Okay, so you want me to just cancel that one altogether?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we can't
Yeah,
do
we
it,
have
just
to.
two of us.
Okay, and then the following is Tuesday.
And that's at 7 o'clock.
Yes,
And is Crystal, is that the only date that we have next week?
that's all I have so far. Thursday, the 14th is available. I can put us in for the 14th if that works. And then the following week, I'm not sure that,
Well, I'm gonna be in Florida the following week, so.
right,
What's our decision deadline on this? I keep forgetting. When do we get?
May,
the-
May 2nd.
second.
Thank you.
So
I think. Go ahead, Mike, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, we should definitely try to schedule 2 next week.
I think we should grab this Thursday time, if you guys can do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna cancel this Thursday and then I'll put us on for next Thursday, the 14th as well as the 12th. Okay,
Okay.
And Judy, in the interim, you can start drafting some of the
yeah.
boilerplate
Yep.
stuff, can't you? I mean, I think if you can get something to us that we can start to look at, it would be helpful.
Yeah. It's a little easier to do that when I kind of know where the board's going. It's like, I'm writing a denial, an approval, but I think I'll.
I think for the purposes of assisting us, I think you should assume we're going to approve it. That may or may not be the case, but I think that will be more helpful
Okay,
as we consider the conditions.
okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm very skeptical about whether we're going to come up with a package of conditions that are going to really address the issues that I think we have. And so at the end of the day, I may very well vote against this project, but I think we owe it to the process and we owe it to the applicant to go through conditions that have been suggested to see whether or not they might address or ameliorate some of our issues and concerns to the point where we can see our way clear to approving this with the proper set of conditions. So that's, I think we owe it to everyone to do that rather than just take a vote tonight and go away. So that's great. And I will look back and try to find everything I can find where people have suggested conditions. I was familiar with Ned's suggestions and with the chairman of the planning board's suggestions. And I know there's others, and let's see if we can locate those before we next meet.
Okay.
Yeah, if you guys have those letters by email, if you could circulate them, because I can't find them in my email even.
You mean Jenny Swenson's letter?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Do you have the other ones like the,
I have everything else that's online. I have.
okay,
My memory is that Denny Swenson did a letter and she did what's styled as testimony of Denny Swenson. But I'll find them and I'll get them around.
Okay.
so what the only dates we have in as of now are next Tuesday and Thursday?
yes.
Okay. Do you think we need to schedule beyond that? Hopefully not, but
Let's just go with that for now, Ted.
okay.
I mean, I think we have some dates after that, don't we, Crystal, after the week off?
So the 26th and the 28th,
Yeah,
it's a Tuesday and Thursday, they're open, so,
right. And we can snag those if we need to, but we're gonna be, if we're still talking about this, then we're all gonna be in trouble in terms of getting the decision out, so. So I think we need to make some really good progress next week at this Tuesday and Thursday hearings. I really think we need to take a vote on which way we're gonna go, up or down, with or without conditions, and so that Judy knows what to write. Okay.
I agree. I agree.
It's been very helpful tonight. And we have some work to do and some homework to do, but we'll do it before Tuesday. So both of those hearings, Crystal, are at 7, right? Tuesday and Thursday of next week?
Yeah, they're at 7.
Okay, good. I kind of like this 5 o'clock time slot, you know, I'm far more lucid at 5 than I am at 7, so. But we'll go with the 7s. All right, thank you, guys. Thanks for your
Okay.
efforts and
Thank
hard
you.
work, and I'll look forward to seeing you on Tuesday.
I guess.
Thanks,
Okay.
everybody. Have a good
Good
evening.
night, thank you.